Welcome to the second ever Field Days podcast, and today we're talking all things frost seeding those existing perennial plots. We're talking everything from taking care of those plots, maintaining them, what to seed, when to seed, what is frost seeding. We're going to explain exactly what that is. I'm here with Brandon Self from Whitetail Institute, the Director of Operations. He is a 14-year veteran of planting food plots, been with Whitetail Institute a long time. He's going to be taking us through all the steps. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to the second ever Field Days podcast, where today we're talking all things spring-related food plot topics. And today's topic is frost seeding those existing perennial plots. And I'm here with Brandon Self from Whitetail Institute. Happy to have you. He's been with Whitetail Institute how many years, Brandon?
14 years.
14 years.
14 years.
Yeah, and you want to talk food plots, this is the guy to talk to. He knows his stuff. He spends probably, what, 3/4 of every day of your life talking to people on the phone about
Every
food
day.
plots?
Every day.
He was here, yes, he got in yesterday on Sunday and was answering emails and talking to people on the phone, and never really ends. And, of course, this springtime, it's a busy year.
Busy,
Lots
yep.
of people out looking to plant food plots. But the topic today, really cool topic. I've been frost seeding for years now, and we're going to get in and talk a little bit because we get a ton of questions, a lot of confusion on certain things of what frost seeding is exactly and how it works and all that good stuff. So, Brandon, just real quick before we start, and we apologize to some guys out there that probably already know what this is, but we feel like we got a lot of newbies that are listening that we really need to educate. So tell us, what is frost seeding an existing perennial plot, and why is it something that you want to do?
It's a common practice. It's getting more popular. But basically what it is you're broadcasting perennial seeds, hard seeds, over an existing plot to help thicken it up, fill in empty spots, that maybe were overgrazed or didn't germinate as well the year before, had a drought or something like that. It's going to thicken up your crop. But basically all you're doing is broadcasting hard seed over ground that's in a cycle of freezing and thawing. So as the ground expands and then contracts with the frost and the thawing and the frost and the thawing, what the principle is, it draws the seed into the ground as that happens, and in turn germinates, as good as it can.
Sure.
On top of the ground, But yeah, it's a common practice. Basically, that's the whole principle: broadcast hard seed over freezing and thawing ground.
Yeah, and here in Northwest Pennsylvania, the time of year you're usually looking is right now is that March, early March time frame, like you said, when the ground's freezing and thawing. And I personally have been frost seeding for years now, and it works.
Yeah.
It really, plots that maybe were struggling a little bit at the end of the year, or had some bare spots. Maybe we had a rough summer, really dry summer, to frost seed those plots then in the late winter. Next year it's like you had a whole new plot.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really amazing. And, we talk about this a lot, but, we talk, there's always benefits and negatives, well, the benefits, they're pretty easy, it's going to save you having to take in and replant that plot, taking all your equipment in and disking it or tilling it or whatever you have to do, it's going to save you from having to do that. And the benefits or the negatives, the only real negative is if it doesn't work, you wasted a bag of seed.
Yeah, right.
And that's the really only drawback there might be.
And there's never been a case that I've seen where you broadcast a seed on top of the ground and nothing germinates.
Yep.
It may be some years maybe limited germination, but it definitely something's going to grow. And of course the success of it depends on how much preparation you've done in the year before.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And and one of the biggest benefits, is one, it might save you having to replant that plot, which you hear a lot of people talking about soil health now. The least that you're going to have to disturb that soil, the better.
Yeah.
So, now you're going in, your only equipment's a hand spreader.
Yep.
And you're spreading some seed. That's your only real cost in it initially. And we're going to talk a little bit later because, you're going to need to maintain those perennial plots with, with some herbicides and some mowing and things like that. But initially, as far as planting, I plant a lot of food plots, and the fact that I don't have to get my equipment into some of the places that I have to plant plots, and I can just take a broadcast spreader and spread it. Man, is awesome.
And the benefits are, there's a lot of benefits to it.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's biggest thing for me is I know you guys always say 3 to 5 years on your perennial plots. I'm getting 6 years.
Yeah, it'll extend the life for sure.
I'm getting 6 years out of a lot of my perennial plots, my fusion and my clover plots. So there really aren't any negatives to it, other than if it and you said it never doesn't work at all. Some of it's absolutely, even in the worst conditions and worst case scenario, some of that seed's is gonna germinate. But worst case scenario, it doesn't do well. You spent the money on a bag of seed.
Yeah,
that's worst case scenario.
That's exactly.
Yep. So let's talk now. There's a lot of confusion on this with a lot of, especially guys that are fairly new to food plotting, and what seeds do we want to frost seed with?
Yeah.
And, I see guys out there talking about, I'm going to frost seed some oats and this, and talk a little bit about, you don't want to frost seed soft seeds.
No, you don't. You don't want to frost seed soft seeds. They're not going to work. The seeds will rot basically on top of the ground. Birds will eat them, stuff like that. Hard seeds, any perennial hard seed, clover, fusion, extreme can be frost seeded. It's probably not the number one recommendation. Clover or fusion will be the number one recommendation, but extreme can be. Some people frost seed alpha rack. Alfalfa's a little iffy frost seeding, but you don't really want to frost seed any annual.
Yeah.
I mean, some people call and they're like, "Can we frost seed our winter greens into something else?" Well, you can. You can do that for sure, but there's no benefit of planting brassicas or any fall annual in the spring and letting it grow, because the deer don't eat it as well during the spring and summer. There's natural browse the deer are eating on, acorns, a lot of stuff. Trees are budding, so they're not going to eat fall brassicas as well. So you don't want to plant them in a perennial spot in the spring and have them grow up and shade out all your perennials.
Sure.
But we do have a lot of people that want to know, can I put a fall annual in my food plot in the spring? No, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. But yeah, any clover, fusion are probably our number one and number two frost seeding seed blends that we have. Extreme, chick magnet being the third and the fourth. But all of those will work good for you. And just like you said earlier, make sure they're a hard seed.
Yep.
And don't frost seed soft seed.
Sure. And like I said, I've been frost seeding for probably 5-6 years now with tremendous success. And I've only ever used fusion or imperial clover.
Yeah.
I've kind of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix
exactly.
it. And we have a lot of success. I have some videos on that. You can see them on our website. We also did a video associated with this podcast all about frost seeding, so you can really get a visual as well. But yeah, so that's a little bit about what seeds to frost seed. Now, let's talk a little bit about, guys ask, well, how do I frost seed? What's the method? What's the seeding rate? What equipment am I going to need to be able to frost seed?
Yeah, and you made a good point when talking to you about frost seeding, that I've done it, and I see what you're talking about now. Frost seed early in the morning or late in the evening, because the ground's harder and you're not mud bogging out there. You do it in the middle of the day when you got a muddy soil. It's tough to do.
It is.
And I never really thought about it, like you said earlier in the morning when the ground's still hard. Do it then.
Yep.
Or in the evening. I thought that was a great point. But basically, you're just getting, and we have an Earthway 2750 hand spreader that Whitetail has sold ever since I've been here, and probably before then, and it's designed to spread small seeds, so it's perfect for our products. Mm-hmm. And that's all you need to do frost seeding. And so you would just, walk the field with the seed, and as far as seeding rates, it's really optional, and it's really up to the customer how much they want to do. What we recommend, and especially myself, I recommend if it was a struggling field the year before, put a little heavier.
Sure.
Go a little heavier. At least, say clover. Say you have a 1 acre clover field. If you want to overseed and it was struggling the year before, go with 8 to 10 pounds an acre of clover. Yep. And really, I recommend that anytime. 8 to 10 pounds of clover per acre if you're doing clover by itself. Fusion, a 9 1/4 pound bag, put it on an acre.
Yeah.
And that's the way I do it. Now, some people want to go less, half the suggested plant. If it was a good crop before, the year before, maybe you can cut back a little bit. But I say at least the suggested planting rate.
Yeah, and that's what guys say to me, and that's the first question I ask. They're like, how much seed should I put on? And I'll tell them, generally, I almost always do the same amount that's required for a new planting.
Yeah.
If it was going to be a new planting. But I always ask them, what did your plot look like last year? Oh, it was super lush, super full. Well, yeah, you could probably get away with a little less.
Yeah.
Or it was really struggling. I'm really, well, might want to do a little more.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk, we have a podcast coming up after this. It'll be our third podcast where we talk about frost seeding an existing annual plot from the year before.
Yeah.
And, man, have I got a ton of interest on that. Because guys are looking at that. It's like, man, I can go in there just with a broadcast spreader and instead of having to take the disc, not disturb that soil. And we had some pretty good success with it. And we're going to talk about that in the next podcast. But, you touched on it, is how to frost seed and the seeding rate. But the equipment all you're going to need is a spreader.
That's it.
And that's so appealing to guys. Like, man, I can, I don't have to get the tractor or borrow my buddy's disc, and I can do this with just a spreader. That appeals to a lot of guys because a lot of guys just don't have access to that equipment or they're borrowing and things like that. So the fact that they can do that, there's a lot of benefits to frost seeding and equipment is definitely one of them. So
yeah, it definitely is a good easy practice to get a lot of benefit out of. I mean, it's not much work to get a lot of benefit.
Sure. So I encourage everybody that I talk to, I say, listen, if you're not frost seeding and you have a perennial plot, you're missing the boat.
Yeah, you are.
And it's going to increase. I said I'm getting 6 years out of a lot of my clover plots, and it's funny, guys online make fun of me because my clover plots look so good. You have the crew that's like, it doesn't have to look like your yard, or it's okay. The deer like weeds too. Well, I'm one of those guys. I say to you, well, how long your clover plots last if you don't care about weeds in your clover plots, and they're getting 2 years, 3 years. I said, I'm getting 6.
Yeah.
So I'm real particular, I like to not, so frost seeding is a great way to keep that plot being super full, super lush, and to get it to last longer.
Yeah, and not just last longer. And one of the key factors for me is when I talk to customers, they ask me what is the biggest benefit of frost seeding. To me, it thickens the crop and in turn helps control weeds. Because the thicker your crop gets, the less sunlight can get to your weeds, so the less weeds are going to compete. So, that's always a big benefit of frost seeding is weed control and, among other benefits.
Yeah.
But that's, to me, is one of the big ones.
Yeah, the nice thing with frost seeding to me, there are barriers to planting food plots for a lot of guys. Like they don't have a set of discs, like they might. But if you can get a food plot in, you have a clover plot, all you need is a spreader.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's go out and so I encourage guys. I frost seed all my plots, all my perennial plots every single year, regardless of how they look the year before.
Always do it.
And like I said, a lot of them I'm getting them a minimum of 5 years and sometimes 6. And we had real bad weeds here. Pennsylvania was brutal last year for how wet it was. I mean, it was an awful year. Weeds were awful. I mean, I was talking to guys all the time, like I can't beat the weeds. But our clover plots did great, and we were able to, with frost seeding and the other things we're going to talk a little bit later with the herbicides and mowing, our perennial plots look great.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit. This is a big question we get, and of course you've heard me say I'm from Northwest Pennsylvania, so when I get this question, I don't know how to answer these guys. And it's what about frost seeding in the South?
Well, it's different. It's not frost seeding in the South. To me, it's overseeding because sometimes we don't even get hard frost. Mm-hmm. So, especially where we are, central Alabama and south, Georgia, Mississippi, some parts of Tennessee maybe, but usually they have enough frost to do it like y'all do it up here. But overseeding for us is just you go in the springtime when spring green up's starting, maybe even a little earlier before everything's starting to green up and just broadcast it over the top of your field before rain. Mm-hmm. It's the same principle as frost seeding, except you're not using the ground contraction and expansion. You're using rainfall to put the seed in instead of the ground issues. So basically all you're doing is just taking the same hand spreader, same seed, going out there, walking the field, broadcasting it over, and let the rain do the work for you.
Sure. We talked a little bit about this last night, and hopefully Wilson and Steve at Whitetail Institute don't get mad at me for this. But their big proponent, their big thing is they want guys to be successful. And I'm a firm believer, I've ended up many years where I got started a little bit late. And I was beyond the time of when it was thawing and freezing and thawing and freezing. Mm-hmm. And I went out and I'd still say, okay, I frost seeded because it was like the end of March, beginning of April.
Yeah. Which is the same thing.
It worked great.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get that seed soil contact, because I get a lot of guys, hey, I'm looking at the weather. Is it too late to frost seed? And I would say what's even more important than anything is that you're getting seed soil contact.
Yep.
And if you have a plot where you can get in there and get that seed soil contact, you're going to get germination.
Yeah.
And I've had it work really well. In fact, I think the video we did for this that associated with this podcast, we were beyond when it was freezing and thawing.
Yeah.
You know, it was a little later, and it grew fantastic.
Fine.
Yeah, and we had great seed soil contact.
That's all
and,
you need
yeah.
is seed soil contact.
So I tell guys that, you know, like, oh, man, it's past, you know, I'm looking at the weather. And guys, I can't tell you how many screenshots I get the 7-day forecast. It's like, when can I frost seed? It's like, get out there and do it.
Put it down.
You know, get out there and put it down. And that's what I tell guys a lot. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at frost seeding. And, you know, a lot of times when you think maybe you missed that magical window of the thawing and freezing, you really haven't. If you get seed soil contact and get that to grow before the weeds can really establish, you should be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So I know one other thing with frost seeding in the South, you get a lot of really super sandy conditions. And we talked about that. And you had said that a lot of times clover and fusion may not be the best thing you want to frost seed with in a really sandy soil condition.
Yeah, no, because they drain so well, and as the rain comes in the spring, if it doesn't come like it so often does in the South, then the weeds are going to get a chance to kind of overtake you. So
sure.
You know, clover and fusion aren't the best options for sandy soil. Now, you could always, overseed with chick magnet. It can handle the drought better if you wanted to, but sandy soil steer clear of
sure.
fusion and clover.
Yep. Okay. And then the last thing, and we're going to take a little time talking about this, is some really important steps I think that guys miss. And I think sometimes we just take a broadcast spray and you're good. You'll have a great looking food plot. Well, it's not quite that easy. And we tell guys, and a lot of guys overlook this, is you're going to want to do some things. We're going to talk about each one of these things. But one, you're going to want to soil sample.
Yeah.
You're going to want to soil sample that plot. Then you're going to want to, we'll talk about liming and fertilizing and when you lime and fertilize. And then the last thing is the maintenance, the spraying and the mowing. So your work is not done. You didn't go out and broadcast some seed and say, okay, man, I'm going to have a great plot. I'm going to go kill a deer here. If you want that plot to really turn out, you're going to have some maintenance to it. So let's first talk about soil samples, why you want to do them, when you want to do them, and then, lime and fertilizing when we want to do that.
Okay. With soil samples, we get a lot of calls, and the guy says, well, every time I call, you say, have you soil sample? Have we soil tested? Yeah, that's kind of important to us because it's a little insurance plan for us as a company that you're doing everything it takes to have the best plot you can. So always do a soil test. Now, if you're going to overseed in the spring, it's best probably to soil test in the fall the year before.
Yep. Because
it's going to take your lime a little while to work, depending on the lime types you use. But definitely want a soil sample because you want your seed. You're investing money in this seed to put down in the spring, so you want it to do the best that it possibly can. So. Soil sample, and if you need lime and you tested in the fall before, go ahead and put that lime down. Get it disked in.
Yeah.
3 to 6 months is normally a general rule for lime. To correct a pH close enough to where you need it. Now, if your soil's not bad, if your soil's a 6 pH and you want to wait till the spring to put lime down, that's fine.
Sure.
But you also the fertilizer, you don't want to fertilize until you plant.
Sure.
So a lot of people call and say, well, we're gonna get the soil test done this fall. We're going to plant next spring. Should we put the fertilizer down now? No, you shouldn't, because then you're feeding weed seeds.
Sure.
Or if you have an existing crop, of course, you can fertilize it in your fall maintenance fertilizer. But then as it comes to the next year when you're going to overseed, frost seed, put down the fertilizer when you put the seed down, or at spring green up is what we recommend.
Yeah.
So when you see everything starting to grow, then put your fertilizer down. Lime as soon as in advance as you can, if not the fall before.
Sure. And I'm going to do full disclosure here, so hopefully Wilson and Steve don't fire me. But I think a lot of guys are like me. I honestly rarely go out and soil sample at the end of hunting season in the fall.
Yeah.
Most every guy's soil sampling in the spring.
Yeah.
And that's just what I've always done in the past. I've been fortunate, like we talked about in some of our other podcasts, if this is a second or third or fourth, fifth year plot, hopefully your pH isn't too bad. Yeah. You're not going out and frost seeding for the most part somewhere that you've never planted a food plot before. So hopefully your pH is going to be okay, but you should, and I said I'm going to start, I got my hand slapped. It's like, okay, I'm going to start soil sampling at the end of, the fall. But even then you look at it like, okay, yeah, I got to get lime and fertilizer in the middle of winter. You got to get equipment in there and spread lime and, lime,
it's tough
not
to
fertilizer, but the lime. It's just that's tough for a lot of guys,
yeah.
Myself included.
Mm-hmm.
But most times we've been fine because the pH is adequate when we do that soil sample here in the spring. We get the lime on as soon as we can, and we've been okay. And like you said, and this was something along with fertilizer, and I think a lot of guys, honestly, I've been telling guys some of the wrong things. You hear, you don't want to spread your fertilizer the same day as you spread your seed because you might burn the seed. And I've told guys that. I a lot of times have either spread my fertilizer a week before or, hit it like once it starts greening up. But, we were talking last night. I learned something. You're like, no, man, put that fertilizer down the same day you put the seed down.
Put it down when you seed.
It's not going to burn the seed. And the way you explain it, I'll have you explain it again, was that if you're putting that fertilizer down a week before, you're just fertilizing the weeds.
That's all you're doing. You're giving them a jump start on your crop.
Yeah,
so, then you're going to be fighting weeds. So, if anything, we recommend putting it down with your seed. That's the way we've always planted. Never had a problem with burning seed. I mean, I don't know, even when I was a young kid, farmers used to say, don't put that fertilizer down with the seed. Well, we always did.
Yeah.
And I've never had an issue with it. Whitetail's done it. That's how we plant. Now, if you wanted to wait, you could wait till after the crop started coming up and put it on then. But you do have a chance of burning the plants. If it rains and you broadcast that fertilizer on top of the wet plants, it can burn it that way.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful there. But we recommend putting the fertilizer down when you plant, or putting it down on the crops once they're up and dry, and try to do it before rain.
Yep. Well, I learned something new. So yep. So anyway, liming and fertilizing, I guess the moral of the story is the ideal scenario. Take your soil sample the fall before, see what your lime needs are, get your lime on as soon as you can, like say at least 3-4, months in advance. We understand that can be a barrier for some guys. Hopefully your pH, it's okay if you didn't do that, but get that lime down as soon as you possibly can. And then, your fertilizer, like we said, the day of like for frost seeding, day of frost seeding, put your fertilizer down at the same time. That's what you'd say?
Well, frost seeding is a little different.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Frost seeding is a little different. You'd want to put the seed down and then wait till spring green up and fertilize frost seeding. Now, this I was speaking just strictly of planting a new plot.
Yeah, so we should clarify that because it is different for a new plot, and we're going to have a podcast coming up here in a couple weeks all about planting, a new spring plot, not frost seeding it, the traditional way. But yeah, as far as frost seeding, then that is correct. You want to put your fertilizer down after you start seeing it green up.
Right.
Is when you want to do it for a frost seeding. Okay. Let's talk a little bit, just real quick, about fertilizer. We said we would discuss this a little bit. I get a lot of questions from guys on fertilizer questions, and a lot of guys are in different areas, and their co-ops that they go to for fertilizer, hey, my soil recommendation came back. I need 100 pounds per acre of 4600 fertilizer, but my co-op only has 3400. What should I do? And just talk a little bit real quick about that, because it can get pretty detailed,
get in depth,
but just the basics.
Well, just say for instance, one of the big ones we have is our soil test recommends for 3400. A lot of times ammonium nitrate, which is what that is hard to find. So people can find urea, which is a different form of nitrogen, at 4600. So if they're saying you need 100 pounds of 3400 per acre, well, you can only find 46. 46 is a little stronger, so you could back it down a little bit.
That's correct.
75 pounds or something like that. The way fertilizer works, fertilizer is a blended, bagged fertilizer is blended. So if you have triple 13, well, to get 13 pounds of each independent nutrient, you have to put 100 pounds of bagged fertilizer down to get it.
Yep.
So if you put a 50-pound bag of 13, you're only getting 6.5.
Sure.
So you got to understand that going into fertilizer, and your co-op usually will know that. So if they say you need 100 pounds of triple 13, well, I can only find triple 20.
Yep.
Okay, well, then you can go about half the suggested rate. So,
Yep.
Instead of 100 pounds, use 50 pounds.
Yep.
And where it gets troublesome is where you got to have 100 pounds of 3400, 200 pounds of 060, and 300 pounds of 0060.
Yeah.
But what we tell people is just call your co-op and get as close as you can. And if you have a question, if you go to your co-op and you see what fertilizers they have, call us.
Yep.
And we'll tell you how to work around with what you can get or what you can find on hand, and tell you how to work that soil test to where it'll get close to it anyway.
Sure. Yeah, my co-op loves seeing me coming with my 20 soil sample, results, and we sit there and we're doing the math. Okay, we got this. And it's like you said, just get it close.
Close.
But most co-ops are going to be able to work with you. And I get guys who get hung up a lot of times like, well, I don't have this. So I just thought it'd be real good to kind of touch on that in what guys are looking at and how they can understand that a little bit better.
Yeah,
so.
and I will say our soil test for our products is very easy to read. And, a lot of times you call our office with somebody else's soil test. We're not soil scientists, so it's kind of hard to comprehend some people's soil tests.
Yeah.
If you get ours and you call us, we can look it up in the computer, colored charts. It'll tell you everything you need to know, and we can decipher that a lot easier.
Sure.
So if you have questions and you've done our soil test, call us.
Yep.
We'll be glad to help you through it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just touch on it real quick because we get a lot of those, and I know there's a lot of different places people can get their soil tests done. To me, the number one, hands down, best thing about the Whitetail Institute soil sample is it makes it really easy for me to understand. I can put down exactly what I want to plant. So I can say I want to plant Pure Attraction and Fusion. I can put 2 blends down, and it's going to come back to me with here's the recommendations per acre for each of those blends specifically.
Right.
And to me, you're not going to get that. Now, smart guys can figure it out, guys who deal with it all the time. I'm not saying that. There's guys who they do this all the time, and they can figure that kind of stuff out, But for me, I've been doing it 13 years. I have no desire to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I want it to be easy for me. I want it to be able to say, okay, here's what you need, and I go get that, and that's what I spread. So the Whitetail Institute soil samples make it really, really easy for, planting food plots for whitetail.
Yeah, sure they do.
Yep. So, and not to mention, I get the results emailed back to me. Usually I mail it within 2-3 days.
Yeah, and they'll have them back.
Yeah, they email them back within 24 hours of receiving your soil sample.
And, a lot of you go to a co-op and get it done. A lot of times you call them or different places. I shouldn't say co-ops, but different places. Once you got your results, that's it. You can't call the lab and talk to them about it because they're not talking. They do so many they can't keep up. Ours, you call us. We can help you.
Yeah, you're going to help you. So I highly, highly recommend the soil samples from Whitetail Institute. But at minimum, get it soil sampled flat out. That's the moral of the story. Get your soil samples.
No doubt.
So we talked about soil samples, liming, and fertilizing. Now let's talk about the next thing that goes into the maintenance. So you frost seeded. Your plot's starting to come up, but there's probably 90% chance you're going to see some grasses and maybe some broadleaf weeds. And, taking care of those perennial plots, and I talked about this in another podcast. I have a lot of guys who, I won't say they're mad, they're jealous, or they're making fun of me or whatever, but my perennial plots look great. But there's a lot of maintenance that goes into them. And you'll have the guy that always says, oh, the deer eat weeds too. It doesn't have to look like your yard and all that. And I always say, well, how long are your perennial plots lasting? Oh, 2 years, 3 years. I'm getting 5-6 years out of a lot of my perennial plots because I really pay attention to the weeds and controlling the weeds every single year because weeds are weeds. And eventually, if you're not going to worry about those weeds, they're going to take over your plot.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we do a combination of spraying and mowing. So I'll let you let's start with spraying first and have you talk a little bit about, what goes into that and spraying that plot and taking care of it.
Okay. So on an existing perennial plot, there's 3 different methods of weed control. Well, there's before you plant, preparing the ground to get it as weed-free as you can. All right. Then there's mowing and spraying.
Yeah.
Like with our slay herbicide on perennials, if you're going to spray slay, it works 2 different ways. And it works through the leaves foliarly, and it works through root uptake. So a lot of times you can spray a field once you got clover planted. You can spray that clover when it's 4 inches before you even, or if you just see tiny little broadleaf weeds, you can go ahead and spray that, and it'll kill those small broadleaf weeds, and then the new weeds that are trying to grow through that residual are going to take up that herbicide through the root system. So spray and slay before you actually get a bad weed problem is probably the best practice.
Sure.
But there again, if it gets away from you and you have broadleaf weeds in there, say your broadleaf weeds get up tall and your grass gets up taller than your crop. Okay, so if it's say 8 to 10 inches, probably go ahead and spray it and mix the slay and a Rest Max and a Surefire crop oil and spray it and get it taken care of.
Yeah.
Now, you may have to reapply again for the grass herbicide because a lot of times perennial grasses take at least 2 treatments to kill. Now, if it gets really tall and you've just been out of town and you can't be at your field and then you come back and it's 3 foot tall, it's going to be a lot harder to control those weeds. But there again, mowing the field down to 5 or 6 inches waiting a couple of weeks and spraying it will probably be your best option at that point.
Sure.
We don't like for that to happen just because it's tough to kill perennial grasses, big broadleaf weeds after they've already gotten that established.
Sure.
Now, mowing to me is probably the most critical part of perennial lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
If you see weeds coming in and they're getting taller than your clover, knock the tops of them out. I mean, I know, like I say earlier, it's tough for people that don't live close to their fields.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we run into the biggest problems. If you live close or if you have access to it or have a farmer that'll do it for you, mow those fields.
Mm-hmm.
Mow them, regenerate new growth. Control broadleaf and grass weeds with just mowing, and then if it gets to a point to where it's not working as well, just mowing it, then you can spray the herbicides. But mowing is very critical in the life of a perennial plot.
Sure. Yeah.
Mowing it, and if you got broadleaf weeds, what you want to do is if they get up, you want to knock the tops out of those broadleaf weeds and clip the top of your perennial crop.
Mm-hmm.
So do that, and then, like I say, if you have to mow it and then spray it to kill off because it's too tall, then you can mow it, wait about a week, and then spray it. Where a common misconception with herbicide is, I'm going to go mow my field and spray it. Well, you can. You can mow your field and spray it, but you have to wait till that new growth starts to come back on those weeds. Because if you spray a field that's been mowed the same day, nothing's actively growing, so it's not going to accept that poison.
Sure.
So you have to mow it, let the crop actively grow back, and then spray it so it can accept that poison into the plant. So
Sure.
that we want to tell customers, don't mow it and spray it the same day.
Sure.
It doesn't do you much good.
Yep. I'll just, here in Northwest Pennsylvania, I'll bet 90% of my perennial plots, I'm able to control weeds by spraying them once. When I see my clover and my chicory get to about 4 inches tall, and if I'm seeing broadleafs or grasses, and I get this question all the time, can you mix slay and
Arrest
and
mix.
arrest? Can you mix those two? And yes, I always mix them with Surefire. And I tell everybody, make sure you're using a surfactant. Am I saying that right? Surfactant?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Surefire crop oil is a surfactant. What is that? It's going to make it stick.
Yeah.
That's what's going to make it stick, and you'll have a better kill of those weeds. But for 90% of my plots, I rarely ever have to spray twice.
Yeah.
I spray it once if I get it early enough, and then I do it with mowing. And I'll mow, depending on how much rain we have throughout the summer. If we have a wet summer, I'll mow 3-4 times.
Yeah.
If it's dry, then you got to be careful. If you are going to mow when it's super dry, it's just like your yard. You're going to kill your yard. You're going to kill your clover, and you got to be real careful of that. But if you're getting a wet summer, mowing those food plots is absolutely one of the best ways
No doubt.
you can control those weeds.
Yeah.
And the one thing I just want to touch on, I see this a lot, and we get this, so I want to bring it up, and it's going to be in one of my later podcasts where I go on my rant and the things I got to deal with that I don't have time to fight with people online about all the time. But you see all the time, don't get arrest, don't get slay. You can get something else, IMOX and some other brand that's the exact same thing. And technically, that is correct, and I just want to explain a little bit of why, and who we're catering to and what the disadvantages of buying that is. And we've talked about this before. Whitetail Institute is catering to the guy that's planting 2-3 acres. We sell in small bottles. That is for that guy that's planting the 2 or 3 acres, correct? Mm-hmm. Whereas, you buy in bulk, you're going to be buying, what did you say it was, 5 gallons?
5 gallons.
5 gallons.
Maybe a gallon.
Yeah, 5 gallon, maybe a gallon. But for the most part, you're looking at 10 acres. Well, most guys aren't spraying 10 acres,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're going to go and buy that now, that shelf life of that, for the most part, most people agree is about 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
that'll last. And it's better being stored in some temperature control. If you're in the north like me, you better not be keeping it in your garage. You can bring that in your house to store it. Just doesn't work for a lot of guys. So there's a big difference. And one of the other biggest things is, I like to say, Whitetail Institute has a weed specialist on hand. Try and call one of those other guys from one of those companies where you're buying in bulk from. You're not going to get anybody to help you with your weed. You can call Whitetail Institute, and what's his name?
Dr. Carroll Johnson.
Yeah, Dr. Carroll Johnson.
And he's the best in the business.
And he's the very best. I mean, you can talk weeds all day, and my head starts to swim a little bit.
My head starts to hurt when I have to talk about
but man, does he know his
weeds.
He
knows it.
But you're not going to get that with anybody else. So I go round and round, I'll tell guys, yeah, man, if you have 15 acres that you need to spray, then by all means buy in bulk. But if you just got a a few acres like most guys, you don't want to get that in bulk. You're going to be dealing with storing it. It's only going to last you for 2 years. Plus, if you're a new guy, like, you're going to need the support, and you're going to need those things. So, that's why I just try and stress to guys is like, we're not trying to hide anything from anybody on the spray and stuff. It's just built for the guy planting smaller amounts. And by all means, if you're doing 20 acres, then get in bulk. But for the most part, most guys aren't doing that. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. But, that kind of wraps up. That was all the points that I really had with frost seeding. And I think I'll just reemphasize and bring it back to you. But there are no disadvantages to frost seeding.
There really isn't.
It's the worst thing that can happen is it floods and nothing grows and you're out of bag of seed.
Yeah.
And what, 20 minutes, to go and broadcast that seed. That's really all you're out, and it hurts a little more when you have a plot where you took the tractors in and the discs and you had everybody there and you're dragging it with the harrow and all that, and you have all the equipment in there and then it doesn't work. This, if it doesn't, you're out of bag of seed. But I've found with frost seeding, it works every single time.
Yeah.
To some extent, one way or the other.
One way or the other is going to grow something.
Yeah, it's going to, thicken that plot up, fill in those bare spots. So frost seeding for you guys, we're going to have another show coming up on frost seeding those existing annual plots, like a beets and greens plot from the year before. We're going to talk a little bit more about the guys who send us questions. Hey, can I frost seed this hayfield? And things like, we're going to get into that kind of stuff and talk about that because we get a lot of that. But that's pretty much everything I had on frost seeding, those perennial plots and bringing them in. Anything else you wanted to add on that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Just, soil sample.
Yeah, we preach it all the time. We preach it all the time. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Soil samples are such a big deal. Then taking care of those plots.
Yep.
They're gonna last you a long time if you take care of them. So, so that's it for frost seeding those existing perennial plots. Join us on if you like this, we hope you'll subscribe to the podcast. Join us on the next one. Like I said, the next one we're gonna have frost seeding those perennial blends into last year's annual plot. Couple more after that. We're going to talk spring planting.
Yep.
Everything you need to do for a new spring planting, not frost seeding. We're going to get a little bit into mowing and herbicides a little bit more and maintaining those plots. And then, we're going to wrap that up with, my rant kind of going through all the things we deal with on a daily basis.
Yep.
But, Brandon, I want to thank you for joining us again on Field Days and thank everybody else for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.